picture of what the disassembled pump looks like with all the parts laying out. And now here's a picture of what the rebuild kit looks like with all the parts that are included. And now here is a copy of an exploded diagram so you can see how to reassemble all the parts so the pump will work properly. I hope it's helpful. So I have two seals. One is smaller than the other one. This would be the water seal, and this would be the oil seal. And I look at my diagram. I see the water seal goes first. Then there's a gasket they call a slinger, almost like a rubbery washer. And then I have the oil seal. Then I have the inner bearing, a snap ring to hold the inner bearing onto the shaft, outer bearing, and then the outer snap ring that holds that whole assembly into the housing. So I'm doing a little Vaseline here that I use to just kind of lubricate the impeller. If I'm going to change out the impellers, I'm just going to put a little bit of this on the lip, on the outside of this, in hopes that it'll help it to just sit down easily, a little bit more easily into the housing. Okay, so I've kind of set it down in there, and I just have to press it so it ends up flush with this. And this is where my persuader is going to come in. Reset just a little bit. Okay, so we have this little slinger gasket that goes down there, and then there's the oil seal. An oil seal must seal on that part of the bearing, so let me I was a little premature with that. I don't think that's going to make a difference. Okay, after a little tapping with the punch just along the outer ring, I have that seated down where it needs to be. Now it is time to put the bearings in. Okay, I think this time I'm just putting the bearing in, leaving the shaft out until it gets to the point where I have to put on the snap ring. Okay, after a few minutes thought, I probably took this socket and used it to just gently tap the bearing all the way down in. Okay. Now I have to put the inner snap ring on here, and then I can put the shaft in, and then hopefully when I go to set in the next bearing, there won't be any problem. And I stopped at Menards, and I think for $3.99 I bought a combination inner and outer snap ring plier set. Seems like a really good deal. Okay. Seated firmly in the little groove for the inner snap ring. Now hopefully inserting the other bearing will be a breeze, and then I can put the snap ring in, and this thing should be good to go once I put the impeller back on, bolt this unit back on the motor. You see, got the shaft up through. There's the back. Get it down far enough to get that outer snap ring. Okay, so I've got it to the point of being flush. And I'm just going to gently continue to tap around the outer edge of the bearing to seat it in. So if you're doing a rebuild, I would suggest, unless you get the bearing pressed in, you just really take your time and go slow. It's making its way down. I can see it's, it's past being flush. Okay, I should be there. Okay, now outer snap ring. Ah, nice. Looking good. Now I'm going to try and put the keyway, the key back in the keyway. Okay, so you can see I cleaned off the old gasket really well. There was no evidence of any sort of silicone on there. So I'm just going to put the new gasket on without any silicone, any sealer. Here's the new gasket. Now it does have this little notch right here. There's nothing on the casing to indicate where the notch would go. And there's also nothing on the back of the raw water pump to indicate where the notch might go. So I don't think it matters. Maybe it fits multiple applications. So I should just be able to put the new gasket on. Okay. All right, so I put the raw water pump back on the motor. There was no question as to which way these went, because the cam for and this part's called the cam, a little screw up top here that you can take this cam off, and that was another part that I could have ordered if I wanted, if I got a complete rebuild kit, but I didn't need it. Seemed like it was in really good shape. But I know the cam is right up here, and when I took the raw water pump off, when you look at the impeller, you see the blades of the impeller are kind of smushed one way or the other, and that's because of this cam. So that made it easy to know exactly which position this went back on the motor. Okay, I snugged all 3 bolts down, and then I torqued them a bit. So I should be all set to put the impeller in, the gasket for the impeller cover, hook the hoses back up, and then start her up and see how she looks. Okay, so here's the old hose that connects the raw water pump to the motor. You can tell that it was deteriorated. I cut back a little bit, still deteriorated. So I got a new hose. I got what I think it's a Daco at Advance Auto. That's the part number. I think it was about 23 bucks. Okay, so I put the hose on. So I looked at my Chilton's manual, and I was able to see what the direction of rotation is for the impeller. So when I put the impeller back in, I'll make sure I have the blades kind of bent the same way, even though I have read other places that if they're not bent the correct way, they'll right themselves. But I'd rather start out with it being right and hopefully just that much less wear on the impeller. And also to install, using approved grease or olive oil, lubricate the impeller and the inner pump housing surface. I'm going to use Vaseline. I read somewhere that you can use Vaseline. I used that before when I took the impeller out, so I'm going to do that. Okay, so she's all back together. Now for the ultimate test. Fire up, check, make sure water's coming out the exhaust, and make sure there are no leaks. Okay, so the seacock is open. I'm going to turn on the fuel flow and cross my fingers. Okay.